talking about from that standpoint. So let's go ahead and get started. Just one thing is to understand, to understand is that in every single study that I've taken a look at, whether it be having to do with coffee, uh, avocados, or anything else, the researchers really do an unbelievably good job of trying to apply their methods correctly. The problem is, and the problem will always be, the sampling that they use in order to do the study. And this is extremely important. And I've had, I think, 2 or 3 shows on this, and I will continue to pound home this idea that if the sampling is biased at all, in any way, shape, or form, then the results will be biased every single time. I don't care how many corrective measures are made or how many of this is done or how many of that is done. If you have a biased sampling, you're going to have biased results. And I know that there are researchers out there, if they take a look at this recording, they're going to sit back and say, Chris, you're wrong. There are ways of correcting this. And I'm telling you that there is no way to correct that so that something is absolutely valid and verifiable. And that's where it has to do with statistical significance and probability. And that's what statistical studies are all about, is probability. So let's continue on with sugar substitutes and talk about this. The reference for the study, it was published Nature Medicine, citation is below. Rather than putting in the study itself, and I don't know if this is why people aren't watching the show or what it is, but maybe they're taking a look at all this and they're saying, Chris, you're shoving too much stuff at us. So I'm going to, instead of putting the actual study up, I'm going to let you go ahead and take a look at the study. This is the citation here, and you can take a look at it. But the bottom line is, it has to do with erythritol. And erythritol is a sugar substitute that's supposedly natural, but it is in things like Truvia and other sugar substitutes for a sweetener. Basically, it's a sugar alcohol is what it is. So the study participants for this study already had a plethora of cardiovascular risks. Now, the name of the study is the artificial sweetener erythritol and cardiovascular event risk. But understand that the risk was already there, and we'll go through each of those types of risks and exactly what's supposed to happen. So the sample for the study, what we're going to do is we are going to center in on the United States. But there were European aspects on this. So 2149 participants from the United States, 833 from Europe. Now, I'm going to tell you 2140, that is a fantastic sampling. I mean, really, really, really good sampling. Number-wise, it's a really good sampling. And there's quantity of sample, which in this case was excellent, but there's also the quality of sample. What exactly is it that that makes this a biased study? And you'll see as time goes on. Now, the sample more than meets the statistical power, a minimum of 0.80, as tested through a statistical application that's it's part of what they call realstatistics.com, and it's an add-in to Excel. It's great. It works unbelievably fantastic. I have a book coming out very soon that talks about all the screenshots on it and how to do it and that type of thing. The sample was collected from subjects already enrolled in quaternary care. Now, quaternary care, what is that? Well, there's primary care, like the thing, you remember, if you get sick, you go to a primary care, right? Primary care physician. And a primary care physician does all the primary things that need to be done, right? You have secondary care, tertiary care, and quaternary care. And the quaternary care, I think, from reading, from doing research and whatever else, is kind of that follow-up aspect. The quaternary care, they follow up with you. And these are people that have already had cardiovascular disease. They already have it. So they're going into quaternary care at that point in time. Sample from the US went through the Cleveland Clinic. In Europe, went through a clinic in Berlin. Now, understand, that's one clinic. That's one hospital area, Cleveland Clinic. Cleveland Clinic is well known. I mean, they do a lot of different studies, especially about the heart. They do all kind of different studies, different aspects and everything else. But understand that's one area, one place. Okay, so that's pretty important to understand there. So, was the sample adequate? Again, numerically, yeah, fantastic, more than adequate. 0.80 statistical power. It's in other words, and statistical power, if you remember from my previous shows, has to do with type 2 error, right? Which is a false negative. So it tries to lower the probability of a false negative. The type 1 error, which is normal, which is, the standard by which many studies are done, has to do with false positives. So false negative means you don't have flu when you really do. False positive means they say you have the flu or they say you have a flu when you really don't. So that's the difference between false positive and false negative. Was the sample varied enough? No. That is a definite no. Absolutely not. This did two things that to me is biased. One is it took people that already have cardiovascular disease. So in other words, they're saying, oh, what's your cardiovascular disease risk? It's already high, and then you shove a sugar substitute on top of that, and it's all about chicken or the egg. Was the cardiovascular risk already exacerbated even without the erythritol, or did the erythritol actually cause the cardiovascular event, right? Whatever that may be. The sample took into consideration only one location. Bad. The sample had many issues with already existing cardiovascular disease risk. Now, this is really an important point. And again, pounding that home, it has to do with the risk that already exists. There's been a lot of different things having to do with the chicken or the egg aspect. The one aspect is vaccinations and autism. I know a lot of people are going, oh, vaccinations cause autism, or they don't cause autism. I mean, it's a very provocative, it's a very emotional subject. But the bottom line is there's never been a study saying, look, which came first? Did the person already have autism before they had the vaccination? Did the diagnosis come after the vaccination or before the vaccination? If every single diagnosis of autism came after the vaccination, who's to say that autism did not exist before the actual vaccination? So again, this correlation causation aspect, they're associated, but did one cause the other? That's what I'm trying to bring out here, So those risks are plainly listed for the cardiovascular disease, which we'll go over, and we'll point out the biases with them. So here's the characteristics of the participants. We're only going to focus on the US only. Age. The median age of the participants was 63. Now, there's a difference between mean and median. Median is more robust. It's less affected by extremes on either side. Mean is more affected by extremes. So median actually is a better statistical measure of center than mean is. Now the range is what they call the first the first quartile and the third quartile. Second quartile is actually the median, which is 63. First quartile is 55. The third quartile is 71. So the range could be anywhere between 55 and 71. So just right there, think about this. It's less. What about the people less than 55? What about the people greater than 71? So those weren't part of the participants, right? Because they weren't assigned to the Cleveland Clinic as part of the quaternary care, right? So very important. You're already having quaternary care on individuals that have cardiovascular disease. Okay, it's very important. Sex. Males accounted for 64% of the participants. That's not the way that it is in the United States. 64% is, so right off the bat, if males accounted for 64%, you're not representative of the US population. BMI, body mass index, 29.4 with a range between 25 and 32. I did some research on this. CDC considers, the Centers for Disease Control considers obese at being 30. So here's your body mass index with a median of 29.4 with a range of 25.4 to 32.4. 32.1. 32.1 is over the obese area. 29.4 is awfully close to being obese. So now you have an individual that is, median age 63, almost obese, right? Diabetes, 22.1% had diabetes. 22.1%. That's almost a quarter. 70% had hypertension. 12%, almost 13% smoked. They actually smoked. So 13% had smoked. 20%, almost 20% of the participants already had heart failure. Now, heart failure there's different types of heart failure, but it could be congestive heart failure, which is a building up of the fluid within the heart area. So some of these people were on diuretics. They were on areas to try to get them to stabilize from the heart failure aspect. So it's another thing. History of myocardial infarction. A myocardial infarction, from my understanding, having heart disease for over 30 years, basically means that you've had an incident that resulted in necrosis, basically death of part of your heart, maybe a small part, maybe a large part, but basically necrosis in that heart, myocardial infarction, which is basically a part of your heart did not get the blood flow that it needed to be able to continue to beat. So 39, almost 40% of the individuals within the study had a previous, basically, heart incident, heart attack. Myocardial infarction is not like chest pain. You have what they call angina, which is chest pain. In fact, angina pectoris, which is literally chest pain, pain of the chest. So basically what happens is you have the idea behind this is that people have already, 40% have already had this. Think about this really, really seriously, all right? Now, low density lipoprotein, which is called bad cholesterol. The median was 96 with a range of 77 to 117. Now, chances are, and I don't know if this was actually said during the study or not. I didn't look into it that deeply, but probably most of these people were on statins or some type of they were on hyperlipidemia. So they had hyperlipidemia, which means they had high cholesterol, and they were trying to get them down, right? So 96. According to studies that I have done, not that I've done, that I've read, researched, is that below 70 is what you want to target if you have heart disease. None of these people, the range is 77 to 117, folks. So none of them were below 70. Some of them were below 80. 79 seems to be a secondary one. High density lipoprotein, HDL or good cholesterol, 34.5 with a range of 28 to 42. You want to have above 45. That's your target area. Above 50 is fantastic. Above 50 is good. So you try to get above 50. Total cholesterol, 160.8, almost 161, with a range of 139 to 187. I rounded these. 187, that's pretty high, folks. Unless you have a really high HDL, but the bottom line is that that's considered to be high. Triglycerides, 114 with a range of 84 to 163. Now 84 is not bad. 163 is not good. So you have, they have at 114 in there. So let's analyze some of these to determine the current risk factors, okay? So hypertension, 70% of participants listed as a major risk factor of heart disease according to the Centers for Disease Control. Obesity, BMI of 30, participants had 29.4, median. Listed as a major risk factor of heart disease. LDL above 100, median was 96. Listed as a third major risk factor according to CDC, if it's above 100. Okay, if LDL is above 100, it's considered to be a risk factor, and the median was 96. Cigarette smoking, 13%. Smoking has been associated with heart disease. Right there. 13% are smoking. They're still smoking, after having heart disease. So you have, I'm on a list of 4: hypertension, obesity, LDL, and cigarette smoking. All 4 of which, at one point or another is part of those risk factors that are listed by the CDC. So, I mean, you have that situation there. So, what does this mean? Well, it means the sample of participants were biased, they're skewed. They were absolutely biased. I mean, these are people that are currently undergoing, quaternary care. I mean, it's interesting how they state in the study that because the people were close to obese, that they would be the ones being told to lower their sugar content. So they would be more prone to use sugar substitutes like erythritol. So basically, these people, the over 2,000 people that were just from the US, had more than one risk factor that would make them a high risk of having at least another cardiovascular disease incident, whether it be angina pectoris or a you know a blockage, which would lead to some type of incident, myocardial infarction or infarction, whatever, myocardial incident, that type of thing. By having to take a sugar substitute, the 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 researchers basically introduced what they call a confounding factor, and this is what happens when you take an existing sample. You sit there and say, "Oh, I have a sample. It's right here, Cleveland Clinic. This is perfect. I'm gonna study these people right here." What you do is it makes it easier for the researchers to be able to get a sampling that's big enough to be able to say, "Hey, look, I meet my statistical power." But the problem is that you introduce now another factor that you think is a risk to already risk inclined participants. So basically, what are you doing? Are you increasing their risk, or are the risks that they already have enough have enough to basically say that's the risks are there already, and you're adding something that may or may not be a make that risk higher. So they complain, they complicate the result of the study. They complicate it to the point where, is it valid? You know, okay, the methodology is there. I mean, even the way that they figured out how much erythritol was in the blood was really, really well done. I mean, hey, we want to see what how much erythritol is in the blood, and but the thing is, and then they took samples, to see if there was more blockage, less blockage, whatever it is. But the problem is there's no other. In other words, people can't exist on erythritol alone. So are they having hamburgers every day? Are they drinking to excess? Are they, or do they have other types of sugar things like donuts and things like that have processed sugar in them? In other words, are all these things compounding exactly the risk that now they're saying, oh, erythritol, this is something that needs to be taken up. So it's interesting how this brings it down to low confidence, right? So which came first? The factors already existing to produce the cardiovascular disease incident, the original one, because remember some of them had myocardial infarctions before, right? That doesn't count people that had chest pain and all these other things. It just counts people that had basically heart attacks. Or is it the substitutes that's causing the incident? So, I mean, these are the things that have to be taken into consideration. So this is not unique. This is not unique. This type of study is prominent within the research community. And basically, I think it's interesting how I would love to see who funded this. You know, who funded this study, and who did that? Did they do it as a result of sugar industry? Did they do it as a result of maple syrup industry? I mean, what did they do? Why? What prompted this study? It's kind of, they don't really say that, and there's no real conflict of interest, at least that they listed. But these are the things that that come into question all the time when I see a study like this. Basically, the study took one source in the U.S. to sample, one Cleveland Clinic. The count of the sample was sufficient, but the variation of subjects was not just wanting, but it was biased. It was literally biased, in essence. But and then again, to be openly transparent, they did list all that stuff. I mean, they did list all the things that were there. So I mean, I love the researchers that give you a hammer with which to beat them with, because basically what happens is the more that they put in there, which is good, the more that they show that their stuff was biased. I mean, they still show results and they still show whatever, and they can give their opinions and they can give their statistical significance. But the bottom line is there's still nothing there that says erythritol causes heart attack. Nothing. There's nothing in that study that shows that. Nothing. I mean, so you have to take that into consideration. In essence, the study showed there was an association between sugar substitutes and CVD incidence. That's it. I mean, and that's taken but there's association. I mean, you could say it was association of driving with CVD incidents. Take all these people, how much do you drive? Oh, well, number of hours you drive and how many heart attacks you have. I mean, I mean, you could do that type of thing. The study did not show that sugar substitutes alone caused the incidence. Causation, correlation. Correlation is not causation, period. By having individuals that already had at least one MI, a heart incident that resulted in necrosis of heart tissue, which we already talked about, it did not answer the question honestly. It didn't. In other words, the hypothesis was, does erythritol increase the risk of a cardiovascular incident? You know, everything increases the risk of a cardiovascular incident if you're going to go with that, if you're going to go in that direction. The amount of water you drink, the amount of tea that you have, the amount of coffee that you have, caffeine. I mean, big deal. Coffee, yes, it's great for you. No, it's bad for you. Wine, oh no, it's good for you. Oh, it's bad for you. It goes back and forth and back and forth. It all depends on the day of the week. So don't blame the messenger, right? The study in question did a great job of documenting, and the thing is, the study methodology was really well done. I mean, it's a good, solid study, except for the sampling. The sampling is the basic foundation by which a study is based. It's the brick by which everything else is built. You got a bad sample, they're going to have bad results. Limitations of the study was presented well, and they did go into that. And they haven't, most studies like this will recommend further study. So I just thought I'd point that out to you. The blame goes specifically to the media. This is a media problem. And I've said this before and before and before. They will cherry pick what they need to get to be able to do clickbait. And because of that, what they do is they dilute these studies. They dilute a very, very good study by not being transparent and explaining the study in its entirety in their article. And that's what happens. So the media is about the clickbait. It tries to raise the emotion of the individuals reading the story. In other words, oh my gosh, I got to stop having erythritol. That's not what the study is saying. The study is trying to associate erythritol with cardiovascular incidents. And the way that they do it is solid from a study methodology point of view. But again, the foundation by which they built it on the basis of sampling is flawed, severely flawed. So that's what that is. Read the story. So it gets people to read the story rather than reading the study, because nobody wants to read the study. It's boring. I don't want to read the study. So don't read the study, folks. I just gave you basically the critical analysis of the study itself. So if that puts you into a situation where you sit there and say, gee, I really would like to see more of the study, well, then here it is. Here's the study right here. And this is the reference. Go to it, take a look at it. It's most of the time these things are free to take a look at. But even if you take a look at the abstract, at least you got something there that you can take a look at and you can understand a little bit better than just reading the story. Because I think the problem is people trust, they trust the media. And I'm not saying you shouldn't trust the media. I'm just saying that the media has an agenda. The agenda is read my story. I want to make sure that people read my story. To read my story, I need to have it so that I bring people in with a hook, and that hook brings them in, and then they read the story. And if I'm a really good writer, if I'm a really good journalist, then I can impact them in what I think is a good way. What I think is a good way, in my opinion. So that's what I think journalists try to do. They have good intentions, but of course the road to hell is paved with them. So that's the deal with this whole thing. So I'm a data analyst. I do this. I do this a lot. I've written books on it. Um, some of the books you can buy at Mercury Learning. You can do it that way. You can go to lulu.com. You can get some there. I mean, but I do a lot of books on data analytics, and these data analytics really come down to, again, one thing and one thing only: the sampling. I took an entire graduate course on just sampling. That's how important sampling is. So if you want to understand a study, understand the sample. If you understand the sample, then you can sit there and make your own judgment as to whether or not the study really says what it's supposed to do, or if there's more, it needs to have more um, understanding of, there needs to be another study, basically. Some more studies on different parts of the country, different parts of the area, whatever it is. So on that note, I'm going to leave you. This has been Chris Greco and the Data Show. And what we studied today, what we looked at today, um, has been sugar substitute in heart attacks, cardiovascular incidents. And we went through the study, went through the summary, looked up different risk factors. I did some research on that. So hopefully that'll help you to make more sense of what this study is all about and understand it a little bit better. So I just say thank you so much for watching, and please, 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 no matter what happens, always check the data, verify the data, and read with a more critical eye, especially media reports on any type of studies, and see if you can get a hold of that study and take a look at it from the standpoint of a very critical eye. Look at it, read it, and see what you can make out of it. Hey, I have no problem at all. If you ever want to get in contact with me, you can certainly do so. All you have to do is email me at this email, candor@statisticssleuth.com. Be more than happy to take any questions or answer any questions, or even do a show based on one of your questions, or maybe based on a study that you recommend. And please, 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 always check the data. Have a great week. Take care.